The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sean Pratt, your friendly marketing manager here at Topia. I'm joined today by our presenter, Dmitry Vigushin. Before we go ahead and get started, just want to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll be able to share that recording with you after the presentation once it's available, typically within 24 to 48 hours. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please use your GoToWebinar control panel. That should be on the top right of your screen. There is a section there called questions. If you drop that down, you'll be able to submit any questions that you might have. You can flag if you're having difficulties hearing or seeing the presentation. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the session, but please feel free to drop in those questions as you have them throughout the presentation as they come up, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. This webinar should take around 35 to 45 minutes. We're very conscious of your time. We want to make it concise, informative, and answer any questions and then get you back on your way throughout the day. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dmitry, our presenter for the morning.
Thank you, Sean. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Dmitry Vigushin, and I have been in the global mobility industry for the last 18 years, and today we're going to focus on an important part of how global mobility adds value to their internal business. And that's through providing meaningful information and costs to allow the business to make informed business decisions. We call that functionality Topia Plan, and we're going to spend some time walking through how scenario planning and budgeting correctly could really showcase the global mobility function and can really make the global mobility function a key business partner. We'll talk a little bit about some business and industry considerations, and then talk about some ways that global mobility are currently dealing with the business and providing them with information. And then we'll get into our Topia Plan demo to show you how technology can be leveraged to really add accuracy, add speed, and add that real-time consultation to the business. If you look at some of the key data that's out there from some of the recent surveys, you'll see that 61% of companies identify controlling mobility costs as the #1 pressure from business stakeholders. How do we control the cost of sending somebody from one place to another when we need that talent in that location? The average number of global mobility assignees is expecting to increase by 25% by 2020. So we're getting pressure from the business to control costs, but the number of people that we need out on assignment is increasing. So how do we leverage the tools that we have? And as all of us know, on average, expatriates are up to 3 times more expensive than local counterparts. So we're really looking to get a lot of value out of the move. And being able to present accurate numbers as part of that process is extremely important in allowing the business to make the right decision. Do we hire locally, or do we spend the extra 3x to send somebody out on an assignment to do that work? A traditional cost estimate process that many global mobility functions are using is a process that's very much outdated and does not meet the speed of the business. For those of you on the call, tell me if this is something that's familiar to you. The business has an urgent request. They want to send somebody out on an assignment, but they need to know how much that's going to cost them. It's a key decision point. So they contact Global Mobility and they say, hey, Global Mobility team, we have this urgent executive. We need to send them out there. Let us know what it's going to cost. Here's the information about them. And what does Global Mobility do? Well, they say, well, we have a provider that has to calculate that for us. So let us submit it to them. We'll get back to you in 48 or 72 hours. Now, the business is confused why it takes that long to generate a budget, but they go with it the first time and say, okay, get back to us as soon as possible. Global Mobility sends this off. They get it back. Finally, 3 days later, they have that consult back with the business, and the business says, wow, I wasn't expecting these high costs. We need to make some cuts. Let's cut out a couple of these benefits. Let's lower the housing percentage from the 75th percentile to the 50th percentile. Let's make some changes. And so what does Global Mobility do? They tell the business, well, we can't make those changes ourselves. We have to send this back out to our provider. That'll be another 48 to 72 hours. And as this cycle repeats itself, what you end up with is Global Mobility, the function, not meeting the needs of the business. And at the end of the day, Global Mobility, this is one area where Global Mobility can add tremendous value. This is also one area where the business is going to look at Global Mobility for their expertise. And if it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get to a final cost, to be able to help the business make a final decision, that's not adding strategic value to the business. So in addition to all of this, you're incurring extra costs. The business isn't happy because you're not being responsive enough, and you're not able to provide that meaningful consulting in real time. So how many of you are experiencing any of the following? You're relying on manual third-party generation of cost estimates. You don't control that process. You're not able to do it in a speedy and accurate way to support your business. You have a slow turnaround time for cost estimates for relocations and assignments. If this is something that's taking you more than a couple minutes to generate, that's taking too long. You have scarcity of robust, user-friendly self-service platforms. Again, you aren't in control of how quick and accurate you can respond to the business, and you're relying on other providers to do this in a manual way. You're incurring significant costs in obtaining those cost estimates. Are you challenged in obtaining the relocation partner data to populate the cost estimate? So do you have access to the information? Are you looking things up for every single cost estimate in a manual way? Do you have an inability to make real-time changes without significant cost and time? Do you have an inability to compare cost estimates with actual expenditure? If any of these things are currently true in your world, there are solutions out there that will significantly enhance your process, significantly enhance the value that you can bring to your business, and significantly enhance the accuracy and speed with which you can deliver meaningful consulting to your internal business partners. One such solution is Topia Plan, and I will demonstrate to you some of that functionality now. So I've logged in as a super user, and there's quite a bit of functionality that exists within the broader Topia Global Mobility Suite. But today we're going to focus on functionality of Topia Plan. And Topia Plan is the functionality that specializes in the budgeting and scenario planning for all different types of assignments, whether it's international long-term assignment, short-term assignment, permanent transfer, commuter, domestic, rotator. We handle it all. And every one of your policies is included as part of the Topia Plan suite. What I'm going to start with is to show you a general example of how an initiation would be processed. Typically, our customers are allowing the business to do this in a self-service way. So they would have an HR business partner coming into the tool and submitting that request, which ultimately would go to the global mobility team automatically as part of a workflow. You'll notice that the first question that's asked is whether or not this is a current employee or new hire. If I select current employee, it asks me for an employee ID. One of the awesome functionalities of Topia Plan is that we're able to integrate with your HRIS system. And at this point in the process, what we can do is send a web service call to whatever HRIS system you're using, whether that's Workday, PeopleSoft, SAP, or Oracle, or others. And in real time, we return back a data set that pre-populates about 80% of this process for the HR business partner. Now, that level of automation, the HR business partner loves because they don't have to rekey any information that already exists within your HRIS. You have several options that you can pick from. You can go down the path of selecting a new assignment. You can also create extension cost estimates, end of assignment planning, and you can also generate scenario cost projections. Now, scenario cost projections are quick ways to provide the business with costs for different types of scenarios. So for example, the business wants to understand whether or not to send an employee to Hong Kong, Singapore, or Tokyo, and they want to know what's going to be more cost effective. They don't have a preference of location necessarily, but they want to know which one is going to cost us most and which one is going to cost us least. You can then generate a scenario and it will ask you a reduced data set and instantly generate the cost based on your policies. In this example, I'm going to take you through a new assignment initiation and show you how you would initiate, or how HR would initiate, a new assignment for a particular candidate that's been identified. Now, all of this is workflow driven. So once you select the path that you want to take, the system will then determine the questions that need to be asked. And again, if this was part of an integration, a lot of this information would have already been pre-populated. So I'm going to send this employee demo plan webinar out on assignment. This initiation form is very much configurable, meaning that we would only ask the questions that make sense to you and to your organization. If there's a question that doesn't make sense, we would not include it as part of this form. So I'm going to click continue there. The next part of questions that it's going to ask me is about the assignment itself. So information about where the employee is relocating from, where the employee is relocating to. So I'm going to send this employee from New York to London. They're going to go on a long-term assignment. Now, you can have multiple different flavors of long-term assignments included, or multiple different flavors of short-term assignments, and the system would manage all of your policies. You can also track various different projects that they may be working on for reporting purposes down the road. And we're going to send this employee on a 3-year assignment. We also track cost centers because oftentimes we are involved in helping our customers cross-charge various expenditures. We're going to give this employee a payroll location, and we're going to give them a salary. Now, if the dependent details are known or not known, HR can select the option there. This initiation process is very much has conditional logic built in, so you can determine which questions are asked upstream depending on how you answered certain questions prior. So in this example, if I select yes, that dependent details are known, it will ask me for the number of dependents, and then it will ask me for specific information. This can then flow through to other suppliers as part of supplier initiation. For example, an immigration provider would need to know this type of information. However, if the HR business partner selects no, that they don't know the specific information, and ask them a completely different question. So now I'm going to say, for simplicity purposes, that my employee does not have any children, nor does he have any children that are accompanying, and I'm going to click continue. In this example, we're only asking for the home HR, but oftentimes we also have a hierarchy of people within your organization that are going to need to approve this cost estimate. We can manage that entire process directly via workflow. So we're going to pick the home HR contact and click continue. Now we get a nice summary of everything that has been populated, and once we're happy with that, we're going to click submit. Now what happens when we click submit is a ton of automation behind the scenes. So I was just acting as an HR business partner, submitting a new request to the global mobility team. It's very easy to do. And once I click submit, my part of the process is done for now. So what's happening behind the scenes? Well, behind the scenes, the system is automatically creating the employee record. We're automatically generating the assignment record. We're automatically creating one or multiple cost estimates based on the business rules that have been set up. We're automatically generating the initiation and pre-departure checklist and workflow. And we're notifying somebody on the global mobility team that a new request has come in. All of that processing and all of that functionality happens within about a minute of the HR business partner clicking submit on that initiation form. So let me just show you how that works. I'm going to look for my employee demo plan webinar. There he is. And I'm going to click into his record. Now, what you'll see is that automatically the system has generated an assignment summary screen. And the assignment summary is all of the information that was pre-populated on that initiation form. So everything that was initiated is now part of the assignment record. We've also created what we call the initiation new assignment checklist, and you'll see that currently the process of cost estimate and approvals is currently running. Now, if I go into the specific functionality of the cost estimate, you'll see a couple things. You'll see that we've created one cost estimate here. And this cost estimate is based on business rules associated with your specific program. So we have some customers that generate 2, 3, 4 cost estimates at a time, compare them all side by side, and then elect which policy to move that employee forward on based on the cost of the comparison of those 4 different scenarios. So there's a lot of functionality that's available here that our customers leverage, a lot of innovation, a lot of automation. And by the time that the business picks up the phone to call Global Mobility to say, hey, I just submitted a request, that cost estimate is sitting on your desk and it's ready for you to start consulting. So let's go into this estimate. So a couple things to show here. The first thing is that we have a summary tab that breaks down all of the costs in both home and host currency. You can actually add multiple currencies here if you need to as well. One key point that I want to make, and one key observation that I want everybody on this webinar to leave with, is that I did not have to manually intervene to generate this cost estimate at all. This was 100% automatically created, leveraging technology and business rules, and the costs are specific to your policy. So all of these costs, whether it's club joining fee, mobilization allowance, all of the on-assignment allowances are being automatically calculated, are specific to this employee's fact pattern, and are specific to your specific policies as well. You'll also see that all of the taxes have been calculated. Now, this is a critical component of any tool that you're using to calculate a budget for the business. Because as we all know, tax is a huge component of cost for the business. So all of these costs are factored in to the overall budget that then will be presented to the business. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have data that supports all of these calculations, and we will create an automatic calculation for each one of the policy components that you have. We put that together as part of the policy. You'll see everything has a specific payroll code associated with it. And we support the tax costs and tax functionality in over 100 countries around the world. You could do quite a few things here. So you can look at this cost estimate in different ways. You can look at it from an incremental cost only. You can look at it by different criteria. So if you want to look at it by assignment year, you can look at it by assignment year. If your finance team wants to look at it by your corporate fiscal year, you can look at it by your corporate fiscal year. So there's quite a bit of functionality there. Now, when the business calls you and tells you, hey, this looks great, but we need to make some changes to it, you can actually come in and make changes to the cost estimate. So, for example, the business wants to approve some additional mobilization allowance. Any of these items can be viewed, and any of these items can be changed. So if you have the right role and scope, you can come in, you can change this to 12,000. You can click submit. And as part of that change, exception management is built into this process. So now, anytime you make a change from what the policy says the value should be, you can track who's making that change, who approved that change, and why that change is happening. Now, why is that a benefit to you? Well, because now you have actual information and data to support making changes to your policy. You can look to see across your organization what type of changes are being requested, who's requesting them, and how much it's costing the business. So I can come in here and I can say, this is very easy to do. This was employee requested. It's been approved. And I'll click submit there. Now, when I resave this cost estimate, one of the things that we'll track are all of the changes that have been made from what the policy says it should be. It's very easy, very quick to add things, very quick to delete things, very quick to work with the business directly to get this cost estimate out the door within minutes and not days. And there's my change. And you'll notice that it says the amount was updated from USD 10,000 to USD 12,000. Given that it was a one-time allowance, it's calculated the value of 2,000 USD or 1429 GBP. Now, I hope that you all could see that the cost estimate was generated automatically. It was generated using your policies. It includes the full cost. It includes the text component and is very easy to change after the fact and work with the business. So if you can imagine the new process, business calls and says, hey, we have an urgent need to send an employee out on assignment. They submit a request. They call you within the next 5 minutes. You have the cost estimate. You're able to consult with the business. You're able to make changes on the fly. You're able to agree to the final cost estimate, and you're able to send that all for approval. Now, how much value will the business view global mobility adding in that scenario versus having to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get to the final numbers? There's plenty more to show, but at a high level, I wanted to stop there and open it up for any questions.
Great, thanks, Dimitri, for running us through that. Definitely, as you mentioned, a lot more that can be shown, but I appreciate you being conscious of everyone's time and moving us forward to the Q&A section. So I want to remind everyone, if you do have questions now, if you'd like to see something in a little bit more detail, Dimitri here is the expert, and he's happy to take you through anything that you might have. Dimitri, one of the questions that has come in, this user is asking, is there any limit to the amount of scenarios you can run or compare in the system?
We haven't encountered a customer that has reached the limit. We have customers that are doing 10 different scenarios side by side. Some customers are literally generating hundreds of moves in a workbook where they are sending groups of assignees to locations to work on large engineering projects. So there's not a limit. We can compare as many scenarios as we need to. And really the only limit would be whatever limitations Excel has from an output perspective.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Dimitri, another question that we've run into is, does the system allow for tracking the cost estimate versus the actual spend?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the benefits of the system. You'll see that for each policy type, we're setting up each policy type with their components, and the components are based on what we call payroll codes. Now, when we add Topia Pay to this functionality, and we add the pieces around payroll and compensation collection, what you're able to do is bring in all of your global compensation into the tool. That global comp gets tied to the specific payroll codes associated with those expenditures. And what we're able to do is then look at the budget and look at the actuals, compare them side by side, and explore what the variance is. And you can do that for any period of time. You could do that for the last quarter. You could do that for the last year. You could do that since the inception of the assignment. So absolutely critical functionality. It's what a lot of customers are looking for, and we definitely have that functionality in place.
Great, thanks, Dimitri. Another question related to the tax amounts here. So is there ability to manipulate or split the tax amounts related to on-assignment costs or post-assignment? Is there any visibility into that?
Yes, so all of the tax costs are broken out for you, and you have visibility into how those tax costs are calculated. You also have visibility into the specific calculation methodologies. So for example, if I go into a specific tax line item, I can view how the system is treating all of the tax components. I could view what's considered deductible. I can also view any income adjustments that were made. So you can see a lot of how the taxes were calculated over what period of time and the methodology behind the calculation and all of the assumptions used to generate the final tax numbers.
Awesome, thanks, Dimitri. Perhaps a follow-up question to that is, you mentioned that there's tax logic for over 100 destinations today. What are the plans to expand that or support additional countries to meet a specific user's needs?
Sure. Typically what we'll do, and we have the broadest coverage of any cost estimate solution out in the market, but typically what we'll do when we're working with a new customer is we'll overlay the countries we support with the countries that they need, and any additional countries that are required, we'll create those countries as part of the implementation plan. And then all of our customers get the benefit of the added countries. And so that's how we've been able to grow to the numbers that we support today. But every one of our customers will typically start out the engagement with 100% coverage. And as we bring on new customers, if there's a need, we will expand that coverage to other locations where we don't have support at the moment.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Dimitri, another question there. In terms of sharing the cost estimates back with the business, are they able to view it directly from the platform? Do you need to export it to share it with them? How does that look like to share the information and get approval?
Sure, that's getting a little bit into our Topia Manage platform, which is a great addition to Topia Plan. And one of the things that you'll see is that the cost estimate automatically gets assigned to somebody on the global mobility team. The cost estimate is automatically run for them. What that means is that they can easily come into the tool, see the output of the estimate, do their reviews, and as part of the workflow process, what they're able to do is actually come in, say that they have reviewed the cost estimate, and automatically via workflow, the tool will send those estimates to the people that are required for approving that work. So everything is managed systematically. It's all done in an automated workflow fashion. And you then have the ability to track when somebody approved it. All of the details behind, if there were any questions around the approvals, are all maintained and tracked as part of that workflow process.
Great, Dimitri. I can imagine that's really handy to make sure that things don't get lost in, trying to shuffle between who's approved, who hasn't, where is it in the process, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So, in a typical process, you have a bunch of different people sending out a bunch of different emails, and it's really hard to track who did what and when and how. We're taking that process and we're leveraging technology to eliminate a lot of that manual back and forth, to be able to track things as they happen, and from a compliance perspective, be able to have all of the information in the tool at all times.
Wonderful. So Dimitri, another question that's come in, are you able to compare sending someone on a long-term assignment versus a permanent transfer versus a local plus? How does the system, or are you able to kind of run all of these different scenarios and compare them?
Yes, absolutely. So we have customers that are comparing different types of policies all at the same time. In those environments, what we do is there's an added question as part of the initiation process that allows the HR business partner or whoever's filling out the initiation form to select, I want to run a long-term assignment, I want to compare that to a short-term assignment, and a permanent transfer, and a local plus. You select which policies you want to compare, and then the system will automatically calculate all of those policy types simultaneously and put them together in a side-by-side comparison.
Great, very handy, I could imagine. There's another question. Okay, here comes a bunch. What data lookups are provided by Topia in the technology, and what are provided by the customer? For example, travel costs or temporary housing, COLA.
Sure. So it really depends on the customer and the level of data that they want for Topia to support versus the level of data that they want to support based on engagements that they have with their suppliers. We can do quite a bit of the support on the data. Most customers will be using one of the big data providers out there, and we'll have a relationship with them. We will pull all of that data in and use it for calculations of COLA, housing, per diem, transportation, those kinds of things. Some customers also have relationships with, for example, household goods providers, and they want to use their negotiated rates to calculate the household goods move costs. But for customers that don't have all of those relationships, Topia can provide a lot of that data to support a lot of those calculations, things like airfare, temp living costs. All of those things can be provided by Topia, or if you prefer, by your own providers.
Great, Dimitri. And a follow-up would be, how often is the data that's being looked up refreshed?
So different data points have different schedules. We have a calendar typically of how frequently that data is refreshed. For things like COLA, housing, etc., the data providers typically refresh that twice a year, plus they also provide updated data another 2 times per year for FX change. So we're updating that data typically 4 times a year. For other things like household goods data, that's typically updated once or twice a year. Airfare data, typically that's updated on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. So we agree with the customer on the frequencies of those updates. And then if the customer is doing it themselves, obviously they're controlling that. If we're supporting that work, then obviously we're sticking to the calendar as agreed for each data point.
Great, very helpful there. Dimitri, I think we're going to use this as the final question for the sake of everyone's time, but please, if you have other questions that come up, you can email us at info@topia.com or dimitri.vigushin.com or at topia.com, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. So Dimitri, the last question that we have is, if I'm changing my HRIS system, am I able to start using the tool now, today, and change later, relatively uninterrupted?
Yes, so the tool is really a standalone technology. It's not reliant on having an HRIS or having integration with HRIS. Adding that integration adds a layer of automation to the process, but it's not a must-have. It's more of a nice-to-have. And so you can start using the tool absolutely as a standalone. You can start using it today. And as you go through an HRIS change, if down the road you want to then add that level of integration, we're happy to do that as part of a phase 2. So there's no reliance on an HRIS integration. The tool works autonomously as a standalone solution.
Wonderful. Thanks for clarifying that, Dimitri. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and close our webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are in the world. And I want to thank Dimitri for taking the time out of his day to run us through the demo and also present the information. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.